When people see me now, soft-spoken, white-haired, always ready with a warm slice of pie, they see just a sweet old lady, a grandma who watches her soaps and knits scarves for everyone in the winter. Hey, but they don't see the little girl, buried beneath my wrinkles. They don't hear the screams I swallowed for years. They don't know the truth. I was born in 1949, a small town where everybody knew everybody, and if they didn't, they acted like they did. We lived in a white wooden house with blue shutters, a picket fence, and a big oak tree that leaned slightly to the right, as if it too had grown tired of pretending. My father, John Elkins, was a deacon at Grace Chapel, tall, stern, always dressed in black slacks and a pressed shirt with a gold cross pinned to his chest. He was the man people turned to when their marriages were in trouble, when they needed prayer, when they needed help building a porch or burying a dog. My mother, Mildred, was quiet, the type of woman who thought her duty in life was to keep her husband's coffee hot and his children silent. I was the youngest of 5. My brothers had already moved out by the time I turned 7. And my sisters were too wrapped up in chores and suitors to notice what was happening beneath the polished surface of our home. By then, I had already started to dread Sundays. Sundays, the day of rest. The day of God. The day of pressed dresses, itchy stockings, and long sermons about sin, grace, and forgiveness. The church was just 2 blocks from our house. Every Sunday morning, my mother would press my hair with hot combs and pin it with delicate barrettes shaped like butterflies. She said I looked like a porcelain doll. Father would beam at me and say, "The Lord has made a beautiful child." I used to smile back. The church smelled of wood polish and lemon oil. Our pew was always the 3rd from the front, left side. My father liked to be close to the pulpit. Said it was where the word hit hardest. I used to close my eyes during sermons and pretend the stained glass windows were portals to other worlds. Places where fathers didn't look at their daughters the way mine looked at me. After church, there was always a meal. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, collard greens. My mother cooked like a woman who thought salvation came through the stomach. The house would be full of warmth and conversation. Neighbors stopped by. My sisters would laugh in the kitchen. My father would sit in his chair, a fresh glass of iced tea in his hand, smiling. Then the house would empty. My mother would start on dishes. My sisters would take naps or visit friends. And my father would say those same words every single Sunday. "Come help me in the study, sweetheart." I was 9 the first time he said it. I remember the way his voice dropped an octave, soft, coaxing, like honey slipping off a spoon. I didn't know what to expect, but I obeyed. In those days, you didn't question your father, especially not one who quoted scripture better than the pastor himself. The study was a small room lined with bookshelves, and a locked cabinet, he said, held private matters. He sat in his leather chair. I stood near the desk. He asked me if I had prayed today. I said yes. Asked if I had any sins to confess. I said no. He smiled. Then he said something that burned itself into my memory like a brand. "Good girls do as they're told, and you are a very good girl, aren't you?" I nodded. I wanted to be good, needed to be good. He pulled me closer and placed his hand on my shoulder. At first it felt like affection, the way fathers pat their children on the head after a school recital. But then it changed. His hand moved, his breath got heavier. He whispered things I didn't understand, things that didn't belong in church or Sunday or in any child's life. I froze. I remember the ticking of the clock on the wall. It's the sound of my mother running water in the kitchen. It's my own heartbeat pounding like a drum. My legs shook. My lips parted, but no sound came out. When it was over, he knelt beside me and said, "You must never tell. The Lord tests us with heavy burdens. This is ours to carry." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded. Because when your father tells you that God wants you to suffer quietly, what else are you supposed to do? That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying it in my mind like a silent film. I told myself maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe I had been bad and this was punishment. But the next Sunday, it happened again. And the next and the next. For years, I began to loathe the smell of lemon oil. I avoided looking at the stained glass windows. I stopped singing hymns. I grew quiet, thin, and pale. My teachers called me daydreamy. My mother said I was delicate. My sisters thought I was strange. No one ever asked why. I always flinched. When my father touched my shoulder in public, they thought we were the perfect family. A godly family. But behind those lace curtains and smiling faces lived a truth so rotten, could make the angels weep. I hated Sundays. It's not because of the sermons, but because I knew what waited for me after the amen. They say you. Always remember the first time, not because it's the most painful, though it often is, but because it's the day something inside you breaks quietly, like a thin twig under snow. For me, it was a spring Sunday. I was 9 years old, dressed in my favorite lavender church dress, the one with little white buttons and a sash I had tied myself. My mother had straightened my hair with hot combs, her hands steady and practiced, while she hummed How Great Thou Art. Outside, birds chirped in the trees lining our front yard. The sun shone brightly, almost mockingly. We went to church like we did every Sunday. My father stood tall and proud in the pews, Bible clutched in hand, nodding along with every word the pastor said. The congregation respected him. Some even feared him, but mostly they adored him. He spoke about sin and grace as if they were personal friends. People believed his every word. To them, he was a man of God. To me, he was my father. After the service, we returned home to a meal my mother had prepared with care: roasted chicken, cornbread, collard greens, and her famous peach cobbler. The house buzzed with the usual Sunday joy. My older sisters laughed in the kitchen. My mother scolded me lightly for not using a napkin, and my father, he sat at the head of the table, satisfied, silent, smiling. Then, as the dishes were cleared, and the sun shifted in the sky, the moment came. "Come help me in the study, sweetheart," he said. The same words he would use every Sunday after that. I didn't understand why, but I hesitated. Something in his voice felt different, a little too soft, little too practiced. My mother glanced at me from the sink and said sharply, "Don't be stubborn. Go help your father." So I went. The study was small, lined with shelves of thick books and dusty family photo albums. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. My father closed the door behind us with a gentle click. I stood near the desk, waiting for a task, maybe to dust the books, or hand him something. Instead, he pulled out his Bible. He flipped to a passage. One I later learned was from the story of Lot's daughters. He read aloud, voice calm and measured, about obedience, sacrifice, and purity. Then he closed the book and placed it on the desk like a sacred object. "You're special," he said, kneeling beside me. "The Lord gave you to me." He placed his hand on my shoulder. First, it felt like affection, a father comforting his daughter. But then his hand slid downward, slowly, purposefully. I froze. My thoughts screamed, but my body didn't move. I didn't know what was happening. I was a child. Only knew it felt wrong. So very wrong. When I tried to shift away, his grip tightened. "Be still," he whispered. "You'll make it worse if you move." His tone was calm, almost kind, as though he were helping me, not harming me. That, I would later learn, is what many abusers do. They twist language, use love as a weapon, and teach you to doubt your own instincts. By the time he was finished, I was shaking. My face was hot with shame. My knees ached from the rug. My eyes didn't cry, not then. I was too stunned to cry. He stood up, adjusted his belt, and kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. "You did good, sweetheart. You're obedient, just like the Lord wants." I stood there, frozen, still clinging to the hope that maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe I had been bad. Maybe this was punishment. I didn't tell anyone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I remember every creak of the wooden frame, every shadow dancing on the wall. I remember whispering into the darkness, God, you watching? I wanted God to strike him down, to make it stop. But the only answer I got was silence. And silence, I've learned, is a slow killer. The next Sunday, it happened again. This time, there was less confusion and more fear. Still didn't fight. What was the point? I was small. He was strong. And worse, he had the respect of an entire town behind him. Each time, he would whisper new reasons. God gave you to. Me. This is love. You're my blessing. He said it so gently that it twisted inside me like a knot I couldn't undo. And when it was over, he would act like it never happened. Call me his angel. Give me an extra $1 for candy. Compliment my manners at dinner. He taught me how to wear a mask. How to smile while breaking school offered no relief. I was quiet, always looking out the window. My teacher said I was a dreamer. My friends said I was weird. No one asked why. I flinched when people raised their voice or stood too close. No one noticed when my hands trembled. My mother. She didn't see it or didn't want to. Once I tried to say something. I was 10. I asked her, Mama, what would you do if someone you loved hurt you? Once I tried to say something. I was 10. I asked her, Mama, what would you do if someone you loved hurt you? She gave me a strange look and said, well, people who love you don't hurt you. And if they do, maybe you deserved it. That was the last time I tried to speak. I began to live for Mondays. Not because I liked school, but because it wasn't Sunday. Monday meant safety, distance, a break from the silence of that study. But it never lasted long. By the time I was 11, the routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Sunday church, family meal, the study, the door closing. It's the same words, the same hands, the same hollow feeling inside me when it was over. I used to think, maybe I'm the only one this happens to. It wasn't until decades later in a group therapy circle, filled with other women, that I realized how tragically common my story was. How many of us were told to stay quiet, smile pretty, and pray harder? Abuse doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people who are supposed to protect you. From fathers in suits. From men with Bibles. Ending line. That was the first Sunday. There were hundreds more. My father was a master of disguise. Not with costumes or wigs, but with charm, scripture, and smiles. He wore his decency like a tailored suit, crisp, clean, pressed to perfection. And no one, not a soul in our little town, ever thought to look beneath it. On Sundays, he was the first to shake the pastor's hand. He quoted the Bible effortlessly, as if he had it memorized word for word, and maybe he did. He'd offer long prayers at the dinner table, blessing the food, our family, the country, and even those less fortunate. Everyone in town called him a good man, God-fearing, and blessed with wisdom. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel the dread that rose in my chest when I heard his footsteps in the hallway. They didn't know the panic I swallowed when he laid a hand on my back in front of the congregation. He played the part so well that even I, at times, wondered if I had imagined it all. I would sit in church watching him raise his hands during worship. And I'd ask myself, can someone who speaks so beautifully about God really be capable of doing such awful things? It was a dangerous question. Because when the world believes a lie, and you're the only one holding the truth, it's easy to start doubting yourself. At school, I became the quiet girl. The teachers praised my manners and neat handwriting. Hey, they said I was polite, obedient, and mature for my age. Oh, but they didn't see the bruises, not the physical ones, but the ones that lived in the silence behind my eyes. At home, my mother noticed changes in me, but she never asked questions. She chalked it up to puberty or sensitivity. Once, when I refused to go to the study, she scolded me sharply. Don't be ungrateful. Your father works hard. He loves you. That was the worst part. The way love and pain became tangled. The way the word obedience was used like a leash. My father would stroke my hair and say, "You're doing God's work by being silent." And I, too young to know the truth, too afraid to question it, believed him. He never raised his voice. He never hit me in public. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he used kindness as a shield. He brought my mother flowers every Friday. He made hot cocoa when we were sick. He donated clothes to the local shelter. People said he had a servant's heart. If he had been cruel to others, maybe someone would have suspected something. But that's how abusers survive. They blend in, they charm, they manipulate. They build trust with everyone around them so that when the victim finally speaks up, if she ever does, no one believes her. Even my sisters adored him. They'd say things like, "You're lucky, Daddy spoils you," or "He's so gentle with you." I wanted to scream every time, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, became two people. The girl the world saw, well-behaved, smiling, obedient. And the girl I really was scared, broken, silenced. I spent hours in the library after school just to avoid going home. Books became my hiding place. I read everything I could, fairy tales, biographies, even encyclopedias. In those pages, I found worlds where people overcame monsters, where justice existed, where little girls were rescued. But when I closed the book, I was still me, still stuck in a house with a man who preached righteousness by day and destroyed me by night. One Sunday, during the after-church lunch, he made a joke about my growing up too fast. Everyone laughed. I stared down at my plate, cheeks burning, stomach turning. My mother patted my hand and said, "He's just teasing." I felt my skin crawl. That night when I was alone, I sat in front of the mirror and stared at my reflection. I barely recognized myself. My eyes looked hollow, a mouth too familiar with silence. I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered, "I'm still in here. I promise." It became my ritual. A reminder that I existed. That I wasn't what he said I was, but some days it got harder. Especially when he would twist scripture to keep me quiet. "Honor thy father," he'd say, "obey your elders." God punishes the disobedient. He used God as a weapon. And for a long time, I believed that silence was holy. Then came the nightmares. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. I'd cry without making a sound, clutching the pillows so hard my fingers ached. I couldn't tell anyone who would believe me over him. In small towns like ours, men like my father didn't just hold Bibles. They held power. They sat on school boards, led prayer groups, organized food drives. And women like my mother were taught to stay quiet, serve dinner, and never question. Their husbands dot, so I stayed quiet. But inside, I was screaming. I remember one particular Sunday when I dared to say no. I was 12. Something in me, a spark of defiance, maybe a whisper of hope, made me resist. I said, "I don't want to." His face changed. Not anger, not rage, just ... disappointment. "You're letting Satan speak through you," he said, shaking his head. I froze. Was that who I was now, a vessel for the devil? He didn't touch me that day. It's not out of mercy, but as punishment. He ignored me for a full week. No glances, no praise, no presence. And somehow that felt worse, because part of me had learned to equate his attention, even when it hurt, with love. That's the cruelty of long-term abuse. It rewires your mind. It teaches you that pain is love, that silence is protection. That truth is dangerous. But even in my darkest moments, a small part of me knew it wasn't my fault. A whisper, a flicker of light inside a very dark room. It told me, this isn't what love is supposed to feel like. This isn't what God would want. I clung to that whisper. I didn't know it then, but it would save me someday. He preached purity in public and stole mine in secret. When I was young, I believed prayer could fix anything. My mother always said, if you ever feel afraid, talk to the Lord. He listens best when your heart is breaking. So I did. Every night, I whispered prayers into my pillow like secrets. Please, God, please make it stop. Please protect me. please let him forget this Sunday. But it never stopped. And I started wondering if maybe God wasn't listening. Or worse, if he was listening and he agreed with my father. I was 10 when I started bargaining with heaven. If I pray harder, if I behave better, maybe God will save me. If I memorize more verses, maybe God will finally show up. Each Sunday, the same study, the same hands, the same silence afterward. It wasn't that I had lost faith, not entirely. I had just started thinking that maybe the God my father preached about wasn't the God who truly loved me. Because what kind of loving God lets a child suffer in silence while a man like my father carries a Bible in one hand and a secret in the other? At school, I had learned the story of Job, how God tested him by taking everything away. I began to wonder, was I Job? Is this a test of how much pain I could endure without losing my soul? But even Job had people who saw his suffering. I had no one at home. My mother became increasingly distant. I don't know if she suspected anything. Maybe she did. Maybe she chose not to look. In our community, wives were taught to be obedient, to keep the family together, to never question their husbands. She often said a good woman knows her place. Still, there were times I tried to hint at what was happening. One evening, I said, "Mama, does God get mad when someone you love does something that makes you feel bad inside?" She looked at me without pausing her needlework. If someone loves you, they won't hurt you. And if they do, maybe you misunderstood what they meant. I nodded. But inside, I knew I hadn't misunderstood. I knew exactly what he meant. I started. Keeping a journal, a small cloth-covered notebook I hid under my mattress. I couldn't say the words out loud, but I could write them down. I wrote prayers, questions, moments I didn't want to forget, or maybe moments I didn't want to pretend never happened. Sometimes I even wrote letters to my future self. "You'll be safe one day," I'd scribble. "You'll get out of here. We'll never let this happen to your children." But by age 12, I had stopped believing my own words. The abuse didn't just take my body, it took my voice, my trust, my ability to believe in goodness. It made me suspicious of every smile, every hug, every gentle hand. I questioned love itself. One Sunday, something almost changed. After church, my father took longer than usual to finish his coffee. I tried to use the delay to disappear to hide in the backyard behind the clothesline, but he found me. He didn't say anything, just grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the house. That time, though, someone saw. Our neighbor, Mr. Harmon. A kind old man with one blind eye was sitting on his porch across the yard. He's home trouble. I froze. My throat tightened. She nodded slowly and said, "I had a daddy like that." It was the first time someone had said it out loud without me saying anything. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She just reached over and patted my hand. "You're not the only one, sugar," she said. "You'd be surprised how many girls this town tried to silence." Her words rang in my ears for days. "You're not the only one." I started to notice the signs in others, girls like me who flinched at loud voices, who avoided eye contact, who walked too quietly. I saw them everywhere now. One day, I stayed behind after my literature class to return a book. The teacher, Miss Beck, who'd always given me extra time and space, paused and said, "You ever feel like the world's sitting on your chest?" Nodded. She leaned against the desk and said something I'll never forget. "The world wants girls like you to feel small. But your story isn't small. It's just not done yet." That night, I stared at my journal and wrote, "Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm just surviving." I started attending a community women's group that met every Thursday at the town center. It was meant for sharing burdens, though everyone knew what it really was. It's a space where women could speak about what was never spoken. I was the youngest there by far. I didn't talk at first, I just listened. One woman, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, spoke about her uncle who touched her when she was 8. Another cried while describing her father's belt and how her mother called her dramatic when she cried. Some of them still couldn't say the word abuse. Some of them still blamed themselves. Some had been waiting decades to say anything at all. And there I was, 16, just a child. Felt seen for the first time in my life. One evening, they asked if I wanted to share. My throat dried up. My hands trembled. I thought of my father's voice. Good girls don't tell. And my mother's silence. But I opened my mouth anyway. My father hurts me, I said, and everyone thinks he's a good man, but he's not. The room went still. Not with judgment, but with knowing. Miss Helen, the oldest of the group, reached over and said gently, "You've taken the first step. That's the bravest thing you'll ever do." I cried. I cried for that little girl in the study, for every Sunday she had endured, for every prayer she thought God hadn't heard. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I'm not the only one. And I'm not crazy. And I'm not ashamed anymore." It would still be years before I escaped that house. Before I went to college, married, became a mother. Before I stood in a courtroom and told my truth, but something changed in that circle of women. I found the others. I found pieces of myself, and I found the voice my father tried to steal. Child abuse, especially within families, is often hidden behind masks of respect, religion, and reputation. Victims may carry the weight of silence for years, even decades, but speaking up, even in whispers, saves lives. If you or someone you know is suffering in silence, know this: you are not alone. You are not to blame. And your story deserves to be heard, share, survive, heal. The moment I found the others, I started becoming whole again. It happened on a Sunday. Of course it did, but not like the others. This time I didn't close my eyes and drift away. I didn't become weightless. I didn't disappear into my mind like I had done every week for the past 8 years. This time I stayed present. I felt the rug under my knees, the air sticking to my skin, the tremble in my chest. I was 17 and I had had enough. He didn't know things had changed. He couldn't see the anger coiled beneath my skin, the way truth had begun to smolder inside me like a lit match. He couldn't feel the power I'd started to reclaim, piece by painful piece, from the group of women who had shown me that my story mattered, but I felt it. All of it. He sat in the armchair, just like always, with the Bible on his lap and that same practiced smile. The study looked the same. The air still smelled of old paper and dust. The clock still ticked in steady. Judgment. But something in me had shifted. "Close the door," he said, like always. I didn't move. "Close it," said again, this time more sternly. I slowly pushed it shut, but I didn't latch it. My fingers lingered on the doorknob. He opened his Bible to a bookmarked page. A verse from Corinthians. Something about obedience. Something about love enduring all things. "You've always been my quiet one," he said. "My obedient one." I clenched my fists at my sides. Not from fear, but from fury. He reached for me. I stepped back. His eyes narrowed. "Don't you start acting like the world's gotten to you. We're doing what God intended. This is sacred." That word "sacred" made something inside me snap. "No," I said, just one word, quiet but firm. My voice didn't shake. He stood up fast. For the first time, he looked unsure. "What did you say?" I said no. The silence that followed was heavy, like the entire house held its breath. His face twisted into something unfamiliar, something panicked. It wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by me. "You ungrateful little, I'm not yours to touch," I said, louder now. "And I'm not afraid of you anymore." It was the first time I'd said those words out loud in that house, in that room he lunged at me, not to strike, but to silence. But I had planned for this. I pulled the pepper spray from my coat pocket. Miss Bernice had given it to me 2 weeks earlier. "Just in case you ever stop feeling safe," she'd said. I sprayed. He screamed. I ran down the hall, past my mother in the kitchen, who dropped a plate when she saw his red, burning face behind me. Out the door, down the street, all the way to the police station. I didn't even stop to breathe. That night felt like the longest of my life. I sat in a small, cold room at the station, wrapped in a donated blanket. An officer, a woman, gave me water and asked if I wanted to tell my story. I did. All of it, from the first Sunday to the last. I told her about the Bible verses, the threats, the manipulation, the silence. She believed me. Let me say that again. She believed me. It felt like I'd stepped out of a nightmare and into the light. They arrested my father that same evening. The news spread like wildfire. Our town had never seen a scandal like this. People were shocked. Some whispered that I was confused, that I must have misunderstood, that I had ruined a good man. But many others, too many to count, reached out quietly. Women who had seen the signs. Girls who had their own stories. Mothers who cried and said, "I should have asked more questions." My mother didn't speak to me for weeks. She said, "You destroyed this family." I told her, "No, he did." It took time, but the truth started to settle. Investigations were opened. Other victims came forward. He wasn't just hurting me. He had a pattern. A long one. I wasn't the only one. And suddenly, I wasn't just a victim. I was a witness, a voice, a force. You never forget the first time you fight back. Not with fists, but with truth. The day I said no, I reclaimed something, he thought. He owned my voice, my body, my worth. It was messy, painful, loud. But it was also the beginning of healing. Because the truth is, silence doesn't protect us. It only protects those who harm. What I learned and what I want others to know is that your voice is more powerful than fear. That speaking out doesn't just set you free, it gives others permission to do the same. It says, "I survived. Believe you, we can heal." He tried to steal my silence, but in the end, it was my voice that ended him. The courtroom didn't look the way I'd imagined it all those years. It wasn't dark or dramatic. It was bright, sterile, cold in a way that made your skin feel too thin. But what shook me most wasn't the judge, the attorneys, or even the quiet rows of strangers. It was him, my father, sitting at the defense table in his best suit, the same one he wore every Sunday for decades. His face was calm, like he still believed no one would ever believe a girl like me. But this time, I wasn't a girl anymore. I was a woman, a survivor. And I had the truth. The prosecutor, a sharp, focused woman named Ms. Jenkins, told me gently before we started, "Your job is not to be perfect. It's to be honest." So I was. I told them everything. The Sundays, the scripture, the silence. The weight of 8 years of secrets. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't flinch. Even when his lawyer tried to twist my words, saying, "Isn't it true you waited nearly a decade before saying anything?" I looked at the jury and said, "When you're a child and your abuser is your father, the silence isn't consent. It's survival." There was a moment of quiet after that. One juror wiped her eye. The others didn't blink during my testimony. I saw my mother in the back row. Her face was pale, unreadable. She hadn't spoken to me since the arrest. Didn't come to the group meetings, didn't visit. But she was here. That meant something. 3 other women came forward during the investigation. 2 were former church members. One was a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. All of them had similar stories. Different details, same predator. His lawyer tried to claim they were coordinated attacks, women looking for attention. But the prosecutor laid it bare. Predators don't rely on violence. They rely on silence. And this man used God as a weapon. It was the first time I saw the jury shift uncomfortably. The mask he wore, the godly man, the pillar of the community, began to crack. When the verdict came, I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. Guilty, on. All counts. The courtroom didn't erupt. There were no dramatic gasps. But inside me, something broke open, not in pain, but in relief. People in town reacted how you might expect. Some were outraged, others embarrassed. Some refused to look me in the eye, but many more Far more than I expected reached out, letters, phone calls, quiet confessions in the grocery store. "You made me feel brave," one woman whispered, slipping a note into my hand at church. I still went, eventually. Not to his church, not the one that ignored the whispers, but to a small one across town where survivors were welcomed and healing was possible. My mother didn't attend the trial every day, but she came to the sentencing. She didn't sit near me, didn't say anything as the judge read the years, decades. Really that my father would now serve, but afterward, in the hallway outside, she walked toward me. Her hands trembled. Her eyes were glassy. "I didn't know how to protect you," she whispered. "I didn't even know how to protect myself." I didn't hug her. I didn't yell. I just nodded. We had a long road ahead of us, and maybe we'd never walk it together. But for the first time, she had seen him. And that mattered. After the trial, I moved far away, changed towns, changed my name for a time. I needed space, not just from people, but from memory. Therapy wasn't easy. Some sessions ended in silence, others in tears. But slowly, with years and patience, began stitching myself back together. I found work helping others, teenagers mostly, girls who had been silenced, blamed, or ignored. Told them what no one told me. You are not broken. You are not alone. And none of this was ever your fault. It became my mission, my purpose. It's my way of reclaiming the years that were stolen. Eventually, I wrote my story down, all of it. Not just in private journals, but in articles, speeches, and one day, even a book. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it for the girl I used to be, and for all the others still trapped in their own silent Sundays. Some people asked why I'd share something so personal, so painful. My answer was always the same, because silence protects the abuser, and the truth sets the victim free. He took my Sundays, but I took back my life. If you are a survivor of abuse, or know someone who is, you are not alone. You are not to blame. You are worthy of healing, love, and a future that isn't defined by your past. Speak up, even in whispers. Get support from a friend, a counselor, a shelter, or a hotline. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. There's a moment years after the chaos, the courtroom. The whispers when your past stops chasing you, you don't forget. You never forget. But the memory loses its grip. The nightmares slow. The trembling hands learn to rest. That's when healing truly begins. And for me, it began in the smallest, most unexpected place, a children's library. I had volunteered to read to a group of young girls during their summer program. Just picture it, 20 bright-eyed, giggling kids in ponytails and glitter shoes, all leaning forward as I turned the pages of a picture book. They didn't know my past. They didn't need to. All they knew was I was gentle, I was kind, I was safe. That moment undid something in me, because for the first time in my life, I felt safe too. Years passed, and I started turning my journals into something more. Pages of truth, reflection, growth. With help from a writing group and a therapist, I turned the entries into essays, then a memoir. The title came easily. Every Sunday after church, a daughter's fight for freedom. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about exposing him. He was already behind bars. It was about reclaiming the voice he tried to silence. It was about offering a light to anyone still trapped in the dark. When the book was published, I was terrified. But then the letters came from other survivors, from social workers, from mothers who read it, and finally believed their daughters. One letter said, "You told my story before I had the courage to." Another said, "I thought I was alone. Then I read your words. That's when I understood. The truth doesn't just free you. It frees others." I married later in life, carefully, cautiously, to a man who listened more than he spoke, and who never touched me without permission. We met at a survivor's support event. He'd grown up in a home where his sister was the target, and he spent his life trying to be better. We didn't rush. He built trust slowly, brick by brick. When I told him everything, he didn't flinch. He held my hand. He said, "You survived more than most ever could. I admire you." We adopted 2 children. Both had come from fractured homes. Trauma wasn't new to them, but love was. And I knew exactly how to give it. I wasn't a perfect mother, but I was a present one, a kind one. It's the kind of woman I used to pray for at night, not for myself, but for the girl I once was. And when my daughter turned 8, the age I was when it began, I looked at her face, her laughter, her confidence, and I realized just how much had changed. The cycle had been broken. People often ask me if I ever forgave him. My answer? I forgave myself. I forgave the little girl who froze in the doorway. I forgave the teenager who couldn't speak. I forgave the silence that protected me, but him. I don't owe him that. Forgiveness, in my eyes, is not owed. It's earned. And he never tried, never wrote, never apologized. And even if he did, the damage was done. What I did do was release him from my mind. I stopped carrying his name like a burden. I stopped letting his voice echo in my thoughts. I didn't forgive him. I outgrew him, and that, to me, is the most powerful form of healing. I'm a grandmother now. I have silver in my hair, softness in my hands, and fire in my voice. When people see me, they see a gentle woman who bakes cookies and knits blankets. They don't see the battles I've fought or the years it took to smile without fear. And that's why I share this, because abuse doesn't come with a warning label, because survivors don't always look a certain way, because silence breeds generational pain. I tell my story so my granddaughters grow up knowing they can say no, that they'll be believed, that their bodies are their own, that being good does not mean being silent. I don't tell it to shock. I tell it to protect, because if even one girl hears my words and finds her voice sooner than I did, then all those Sundays weren't wasted. It was my beginning, but I chose how the story ends. If you are living with pain that no one sees, hear this. You are not alone. You are not to blame. You deserve safety, love, and peace. Call a hotline. Tell a friend. Write it down. Say it out loud. Your voice is your power. And your story, no matter how painful, can light the way for someone else. Subscribe for more true survivor stories that bring truth, healing, and awareness into the light. We are not silent anymore.